Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We have now reached the final group discussion of the conference. The topic of the discussion is payment systems, evolving paradigms. We have for this discussion a very distinguished panel. At the outset, the moderator of the panel is Mr. S.R. Bansal, CMD of Corporation Bank. Mr. Bansal took over charge as the Chairman and Managing Director of Corporation Bank on 5th October 2013. Prior to assuming the position of CMD, he was Executive Director in Punjab National Bank. During his tenure, the respective banks have won many prestigious awards, like the Scotch Award for Financial Inclusion, Best Bankers Award under Agriculture Lending Large by the Sunday Standard, and the MSME National Awards by the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. On the panel, we have Mr. A.P. Hota, MD and CEO of National Payments Corporation of India. Mr. Hota has played a key role in implementation of microtechnology in check clearing, electronic funds transfer, automated clearing house ACH, check truncation system, and RTGS. Under his leadership, NPCI launched India's own card, RuPay, in a record of 3 years' time. RuPay is now accepted on all three channels, namely the ATM, POS, and e-commerce, with an issuance figure of over 170 million cards. Next on the panel, we have Dr. A.S. Ramashastri, who is Director of IDRBT, an institute which is established by Reserve Bank of India for research and development in banking technology. Dr. Ramashastri has guided the Bank of Mauritius, Bank of Malaysia, and Bank of Uganda on implementation of data warehouse, XBRL, etc., and has delivered talks on standards and technology for data reporting at the IMF, as well as the Bank for International Settlements. Then, on the panel, we have Mr. Shishir Mankad, who is Senior Vice President with Axis Bank and heads products and solutions for transaction banking encompassing trade, forex, and cash products. Prior to joining Axis Bank, Mr. Bankad worked with Boston Consulting Group, focusing on financial service clients. He is a chartered accountant and holds a postgraduate diploma in management from IIM Ahmedabad. And also in the panel is Mr. Sanjeev Subba. Mr. Subba started his professional journey with the then Grindlays Bank in the early 1990s. In the late 90s, he moved to Thailand to be part of a team to start a brand new American university, namely Webster, where he worked for more than 10 years as executive director, overseeing the entire graduate program. Currently, he is the chief executive officer of National Banking Institute, which is based in Kathmandu, Nepal. To set the floor for this panel discussion, I have the privilege of making a short presentation on the subject, payment systems, evolving paradigms. In this slide, we see that the amount of cash which is in circulation in India is very high, almost 11.5% of the GDP, as you can see there. That means there is a large headroom available for channeling these savings into the banking fold, which automatically means that there is a large scope in making a large scope available for increasing the payments volumes. There has also been, if you see the diagram on the right-hand side, there has also been a large shift in retail payments from paper forms to the digital forms. Electronic payments are also increasing at an increasing pace from about 10% per annum 5 years ago to over 30% per annum currently. This gives you a position of what the position is in India vis-a-vis some of the other parts of the world. So we can see that there is a huge scope of increasing electronic transactions. Therefore, whereas in USA and UK, the number of non-cash payments per person per year is around 300 to 360, in India it's just about 6. In fact, even in China, it's around 6. This slide gives an evolution of the payment systems in India. So we move from cash to cards, plastic cards, to digital. And then we have the disruptive innovations, biometric devices, NFC devices, and voice biometrics. The present slide gives a profile of the digital payment landscape in India. Very clearly, it is the wallets which are showing sharp exponential increases, both in volumes as well as in amounts. From the diagram on the top right, we can see that the YOY growth in wallets is almost 230%. This brings us to some of the challenges that we may face while adopting digital payment systems in the near future. We have the supply side challenges and we have the demand side challenges. So supply side, we have safety, reliability, interoperability, physical infrastructure, increasing the number of cash out points, stickiness in prices, building ecosystems, and vested interests. Sometimes it may not be in the interest of everybody to try to move people into the banking system and therefore get into the payments. From the demand side, we have challenges like customer experience, product design, customer education, and the actual usage of products. But there are huge opportunities as well, as you can see from this slide. And if you see from the items, it is not just financial inclusion. In fact, it also includes fiscal inclusion, which will be a big step for India or any part of the globe which is moving rapidly into payment systems. And finally, we come to the various focus points on which this discussion may revolve around. Namely, how should banks reposition themselves to meet challenges from payment banks? Then, with brick and mortar branches facing obsolescence, how will banks metamorphose to continue sourcing business? With customers increasingly using alternate delivery channels, how will banks maintain contacts with their clients? With digital banking growing exponentially, what will be the new risks and how would they be mitigated? Availability of digital channels is one aspect. Getting clients to use them is another aspect altogether. How will we be able to educate so many clients adequately and to successfully migrate to newer payment systems? With this, I would request Mr. Bansal to kindly lead the discussions for this panel. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Datta sir, for highlighting in brief the challenges and the opportunities. Thank you, Datta sir, for highlighting in brief the challenges and the opportunities ahead of us. The payment mechanism to bring in more efficiency and transparency in the system is moving from cash to contactless payment to mobile money in India. This evolution has been made possible concurrent to a series of measures initiated to contain the systematic risk in payment and settlement system. Besides the regulatory push, the government initiatives such as Jan Dhan, DBT, etc. have further given a big flip to this shift. The emphasis on digital India would further intensify the movement, helping to cover more and more number of entities and people, bringing in speed and ease of making payments. It is in the last 10 years that India has witnessed this major shift from cash-based payment to electronic payment system, thanks to various measures taken by Reserve Bank of India, including introduction of Payment and Settlement Act, the setting up of robust RTGS and NIFT, and of course, National Payment Corporation of India, regulation and promotion of alternative channels, and payment gateway, and guidelines on security measures for the electronic transactions. This shift has also increasingly been added by evolution of telecommunication and computing technology, both in terms of speed and reduced cost. While electronic payment systems have registered impressive growth, the benefits of the modern electronic payment system are yet to reach far and wide. They are generally now being benefited to the tier 1 and tier 1 locations people. So the benefit to those citizens who have already access to formal banking. The financial inclusion efforts by the Government of India in the last few months, we have all witnessed, have helped in gathering speed of reaching out to the villages. The Aadhaar infrastructure has given a significant support to these efforts. Today we are seeing a transformation of the payment ecosystem, not only in retail segments, but in all segments such as business to customer, business to business, government to citizens, and consumer to government. Mr. Datta has rightly said in his presentation that at 11.5%, India has almost highest currency in circulation as percentage of GDP. This leaves much room for migration from cash check to e-payments. Non-cash transactions per individual, as he said, are very less, 6 per individual per year, as compared to 360 in USA and 300 in UK. The payment through M-Wallet and prepaid instrument is less than 6% of the total digital transactions. Also, the population using internet through mobile is expected to touch around 70 crores by 2020 as compared to the current level of 26 crore. It is estimated that internet banking users to grow from the present status of 6 crore to 23 crores by 2020. This type of scenario has posed great challenge to conventional banks to reorient and to reinvent products and processes which has capabilities to face the challenges of the emerging customer preferences and to retain its prominence in the financial world. All these developments, they show that the remarkable changes happening in the payment sector, but it is a fact that only those innovations which offer a combination of consumer benefits by way of convenience, speed, reduced cost, and error-free settlement would only survive. The entry of new payment banks and new players will definitely increase the competition in the industry. We all must be seeing that those who have got the in-principle approval for payment banks, they have platform, they have customer base, they have infrastructure, they have expertise, they have technology, and they have also adequate capital base. We must prepare ourselves to take on these challenges and to be more innovative so that we not only match the products and services that are on the offering from these new players, but also meet the growing requirement of the customers. Banks may also explore possibilities of tie-up with these entities so that it can be a win-win situation. In this context, can I request each of my panelists to offer brief comments on how should banks reposition themselves to meet the challenges from payment bank. I'll request Mr. Hota to express his views.
Thank you very much, sir. At the outset, thanks to IIBF for being a part of ABABI conference, the conference. Warm welcome to the delegates. Before I answer their questions, I just 1 or 2 minutes, really a general idea about the payment systems in India, particularly for the benefit of international delegates. During the last 10 years, the payment landscape in India has undergone metamorphosis, significant changes. In fact, all possible advanced payment systems that you can think of are available in India right now. The traditional mode of clearing, which is the check clearing, has also been modernized in the form of check truncation system. The ACH system, the old ways of salary, dividend, in pension payment, has come to a new platform of ACH. Mobile banking has come up in a big way, although the number has not taken off, it has been put in place. Country has developed a card brand of its own. All the 2 lakh plus, 200,000 plus ATMs have been made interoperable. Point of sale terminals, as Mr. Tangsale Saab, CEO, IBA has already indicated, the number is there, not good enough, but the point of sale terminals are there. E-commerce has gone up in a big way, almost 30 to 35% increase year-on-year growth. E-commerce, and the indications are that it will grow in a significant way. Even if so much of changes have taken place, there are a lot of things to do. And it is in the wisdom of Reserve Bank of India that new set of institutions which are focused on payments, dedicated for payments, should there to further 2 purposes: financial inclusion and the innovations in payments. So obviously the first thing response the banks would have is, what is it that was lacking that the payment banks have come? In fact, payment banks have come the way I see, with a few Ds, disruptive innovations. They are coming with the innovative methods which are totally disruptive. In fact, some of the new payment banks which are coming with the card payment acquiring business, which is totally different from the traditional ones. It might disrupt the acquiring and issuance fees, that interchange mechanism. There are thoughts are going on that can there be card payment mechanism which with minimal interchange, talks something of that sort. They are coming out with point of sale terminals which can be, if something goes defective, just throw away. Means very, low value, low amount of this thing. So disruptive technologies are coming. So the banks, so far they have not they gone for that. So the first response is whether to compete with them or cooperate with them. Thankfully, of the 11 new players, there are 3-4 players which are there. They have tied up with the banks, and it is a good move, like State Bank of India and Reliance. They are thinking of really Reliance, as I understand, strategically, 2 million terminals they would like to set up. It is a disruptive innovation, and it is really a cooperation between State Bank of India and Reliance. So similarly, there are few other players. The telcos, all along, the telcos and the banks, there were issues on which we have not been able to build convergence, particularly on USSD fees. Now they are coming to the banking stream, and they would be part of the banking infrastructure and the USSD infrastructure. They were running one USSD, and now they would be part of the banking system. So the response would be again a cooperation that would emerge. But it is a good thing for them that now they are coming as payment bank, and if banks can really come, the interoperability would be at all levels. Now USSD is interoperable, but interoperable to the advantage of telcos and to the disadvantage of banks. Once they become banks, possibly the things would be different. That is how I view it. So the disruptive innovation is the 1D, and these banks with a distinct focus on payments. Unlike the universal banks, payments is one important aspect, but not the most important. But these institutions are coming with the most important focus. You know, almost a daredevil attitude for investment, almost innovations. So with they have the direct connect with the customers by having a large outlets. They can really access the deposit faster. So that way the banks, my take is that it is a good thing for the country, good thing for the customers. And banks, if they can leverage, it would be good for the banks as well. So banks need not see them as a competitor, but as a as their partner. In their mandate also, they can act as the business correspondents of other banks. It is very much in the mandate. So why not to utilize the mandate instead of really competing? So in all ways, I would see that Reserve Bank's vision to bring the set of institution is to fill the gap and to meet the crying needs for bringing innovations in the payment system. All of you know, very recently, Nandan Nilekani was talking in the Leapfrog seminar about, you know, one example of disruptive innovation. You know, all the telcos, they have the messaging platform, the SMS we can send. After WhatsApp came, a small farm came, and now all the messages that goes through WhatsApp is larger than all the messages of all the telcos put together. That is the example. So similarly, in the payment space, if somebody comes like the WhatsApp attitude in payments, at least the micro payments, which many banks are, even the large banks are doing, some of these innovators can really can bring it to the table. And it is good for the customers, good for the country. And banks should leverage instead of looking them as competitor. Had way back in 96, 97, had the public sector banks really thought that with the entry of the private banks, our business will go away. It has not gone away. The public sector banks have really prospered along with the growth of the private sector. Now the payment banks have come. They are obviously, initial perception would be a threat. And if they can really work out, respond to in a very positive framework, it would be a win-win for new payment banks as well as the banks. That is how I look at it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Guptaji. Telling about so many Ds they are bringing, and it's not a threat, not a competition, but a partnership. Thank you. And I'll request Mr. Ramasastri.
For some of you who are not familiar with this, particularly those who come from the others, the payment bank idea itself. So we call it bank. Traditionally, we understand bank to be something which take deposits to lend. These banks' main focus is not lending. In fact, they are not expected to lend. They are actually taking another space, which is payments. See, why payments and banks are related is traditionally, if you see, most of the payments are either cash-based or non-cash-based. And on non-cash-based, these payments are routed through the banks. That's how banks do more and more into the payment space. That's how the payment space is with the banks. So once the payment space is the banks, banks are expected to give more features to the customer so that they'll be able to do these payments quite comfortably. See, actually, we can say 2-3 important features that a customer would be looking for. One is the cost, second is the convenience, the third, if you say, it's a control over the transaction. At any point of time, you should be able to do it. The banks were expected to do these payment space, and they have been doing it quite well. The thing that has started over last several years, maybe 4 to 5 years, is the different kinds of payment systems. We started with the Reserve Bank setting up an RTGS and NEFT and all that, which was going on, but they were all central bank managed and the people were using it. But now slowly this movement has started from a central bank managing the payment systems in various ways, whether it's check and other things, to various private parties and others also able to give the payment system. See, this is what is happening across the globe. I mean, it is not that in Indian scene, it is across the globe. In fact, when we did a study and looking at various payment systems across the globe, some interesting features came. The developed countries were actually the private parties which were driving the payments, and many of the countries were doing a lot of payments through digital means. In some of the countries, like, we can cite examples like Kenya and other countries, it's not just the private, it's the entire ecosystem that drove maybe the necessity or one of them. But when you take a country like India, we were seeing that it is neither the model of the developed countries nor the model of the other countries like Kenya. So we were not, actually the banks were not able to get into this. So there are digital wallets and other things that are coming. Of course, they have some limited usages, but still they are the payment mechanism. It is under this context, the Reserve Bank of India thought that it might be right to come with a system of banks which will be exclusively devoting themselves to the payments. Now, what are the challenges that the banks might face when these payment banks are come? There are two kinds. First one I don't want to discuss too much. Because of their reach and that they can collect deposits also, is there a challenge to the existing commercial banks that some of the deposit which they were earlier enjoying is possible to be going to payment banks? And that I do not want to discuss, but that's a different topic which we have to look at it also. The second space is the payments actually. Is it that most of the payments that today the commercial banks and others are doing, is it that they move to the payment banks and most of it is going to be managed by them? This is a challenge. This is a challenge because the payment banks are those which already have that kind of technology that is required to provide what I was telling as low cost and high convenient and a lot of control of the system. The mobiles are equivalent to mobiles are available. India is one of the countries where mobile penetration is very, very high. Even where there is no other things available, mobiles are available, people are using it. If that is the case, then mobile companies which are actually the telcos, are they in a better position to provide this payment mechanism? That's one thing. Second thing is something like postal, which has got a good reach across the places. The availability is there everywhere, and we know very well in small villages also postal people are the people friendly to the local villagers, whether they will be able to come and deliver the services which are actually required for the people. So that's the second challenge that the banks may have. Like either the telcos which are highly technology oriented, or the postal which have greater reach, whether some of them will be able to get into payment space, which will be actually a problem to the. But here, I also would like to tell what are the challenges to the payment banks. Now, we are only talking that once the payment banks come, there are problems or challenges to the commercial banks. But the payment banks themselves, we have to look at the whole space. In India, why, with all the efforts made by the regulator, the government and the banks, why we could not take these payments, which are obviously like NPCI was set up, so many things, but still we are not able to encourage the people to participate in the technology-oriented payments. It does not happen. No. When these new banks come, they also have to address this particular issue, what are the gaps are there. In fact, we did a study at IDRBT, actually going to some districts in Andhra Pradesh, looked at what are the features that are lacking. Now, some of the things that have come out is that the lack of awareness, which is what discussed earlier also, lack of education to the people who are providing, see, even the branch staff or the BC, they should be able to tell them that this is possible to do. And the third most important thing, I think that will get addressed more and more, even when we talk about other things, is the trust. Now, are the people going to believe that if they send a transaction through this mechanism, we know friends at our own educated, somebody was talking about education, even we know our own people who are educated who are afraid to go to an internet bank kind of things. They are not still getting into it who are educated. Now we are targeting the people who are not in this region at all. The rural, the segment that we are trying to look at is a rural, not so educated, not so wealthy. This kind of 70 to 75% of the population, how you will be able to bring into them is still a challenge to the new payment banks that are going to come. But however, if they are able to bring them into this, for whatever way it is, then it is a good thing to happen to the overall banking system. So more people come into payment space using these kind of new things, and then certainly the banks also will take an advantage, and it will be a combination, the whole thing will work for the country as a whole. So the challenge is both to the existing banks when the new banks, payment banks come, and the challenge is there even for payment bank to somehow or other get these people into the system. So I think the next 2-3 years after the payment banks come is an exciting period for the country, and we have to see how the payment scenario will completely undergo a change in the country. Another thing that is likely to happen is, yes, the disruptive technology is good, but whether disruptive technology is good for a country like India, where we have got spread out. Is it incremental? Is it disruptive? It's a big topic that has to be debated by even the payment banks. Sometimes the disruptive technology may not really take us to the place where we want when we have got diverse participants across the country whom we have to take us around. The challenges are plenty for both the existing banks and also for the payment banks. That's how
Yeah,
it is.
thank you, Mr. Ramasastry. I think you have very well said two things. One is that there may be threat for deposits, but let me share that this Jan Dhan, we have the experience reaching out to the rural masses and creating faith. Actually, our bank collected the highest, per account balance, 3,200, which is as good as average in other accounts. And we have shown that this Jan Dhan is profitable. Last year, we incurred 12 crores 70 lakhs, and we got income of 14 crores 77 lakhs. And we gave a press release that we have earned 2 crores 7 lakhs. So I think we have learnt, our BCs are working, and if we make them more active, I think we can meet that challenge of deposits going away. And one more point you have said very well, that this cash will be replaced by non-cash, and bank will have some space, more space to do some more business. Thank you very much. I request Mr. Mankad to share his views on this topic.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bansal. I was just hearing both Mr. Hota and Mr. Ramashastri say talk about their thing. I was reminded of a visit to Chicago, where if you go to Wells Fargo in their office, they have a museum there. It's a very nice museum. It talks about the history of Wells Fargo, how they started as a carriage business, a logistics company which used to take mail from place A to place B. And that mail became a bill, that bill became money, and Wells Fargo became a bank. That Wells Fargo of 200 years ago is unrecognizable from today's Wells Fargo, which is a very technology intensive, very astute, a very diversified institution. And I think much the same degree of transformation is looming large upon the Indian banking system, and all of it for good reasons. There are two ways banks can look at what will happen to them with payment banks coming in. First is, the first response is agility. If conceptually payment bank is a focused business on primarily one line of activity, which is payments, and therefore banks which are a sort of conglomerate of financial businesses have to compete against this focused, nimble player. One response strategy obviously is agility. And I think one thing that the banks will have to do, and I think that if you look at if you decompose the banking business, you can already see it in the digital parts of the banking business. But really banks have to figure out how they can become agile at competing with, not necessarily copying, maybe copying if need be, but competing with the things that the payment banks will likely to bring. And while the payment banks obviously have, or let's say wallets have recorded impressive numbers, an unsung fact is that if you look at our own case, so we have about 20 million odd customers, 18-20 million customers. We've seen some massive growth in transactions on our own mobile app. I mean, it's zoomed from nothing to we do now about 1,500 crore rupees per month on mobile app, and these are financial transactions by bank customers. So we're seeing a revolution within today's bank system. And I think our challenge as banks is going to be how to make sure we internally create the framework to allow for that agility to foster and grow, so that we can take stuff coming from payment banks head on. That's a competitive kind of response to how they can look at it. There's another way to respond to that, which is a bit like a tortoise going into a shell when there is a provocation from outside. And I call it the back to basics strategy. Yeah? I mean, if you look at fundamentally, what do banks bring to consumers? Consumers have 5 financial needs: save, invest, borrow, insure, and transact. And I think if banks think very carefully about where their real competencies lie, what are those things where they can differentiate against the payment banks and build a business, or I would say augment their business on those, I think there is a very fitting response strategy. And if you put these together, right, the agility part, which is compete on much the same dimensions, and a back to basics start, which is flank them with other things where you are unique at, you really come back to what I think Mr. Hota articulated, which is it is some places we will compete, some places we will collaborate, and there is this management term I'm reminded of, which is co-opetition. We need to figure out where we'll compete with them, and we should compete hard and build the capabilities. But there are enough places to collaborate with them where we can feed off the stuff and innovation and the markets that they can open. Ultimately, banking is a flow business, and the more flows that are created, the bigger the networks that are set up, everybody in the system benefits. And I think we need to figure out what are the spaces that will get opened up when these payment banks come and build their businesses, and how we can feed off that. And again, I think really all of us, banks, payment banks, other financial institutions, have to think of why is it that today, despite so much intervention, we still regret and lament on the relative lack of progress on financial inclusion. And it comes down to some very basics that a bank is supposed to offer. It comes down to trust. It comes down to reliability. It comes down to convenience. It comes down to fairness. If those basic tenets are still, all of us, banks, payment banks, network institutions, other non-banks have to sit and solve if we need this financial inclusion to take off. So I think that question still remains center stage, because we can create form factors of banks and payment banks and small banks. But really, if you put a customer at the center and say, why are they not using the pre-existing infrastructure, that question still remains unanswered. And that's a puzzle that we still need to work towards solving.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mankad. Actually, you have rightly said that it will make banks more agile and more customer friendly. Thank you. Mr. Sanjeev Subha.
Thank you so much. I mean, like to share like some perspective from like my own country, actually, what we are experimenting with branchless banking, and in terms of leveraging on technology when it comes to banking. For the Nepali banking landscape, I mean, we are very new. The private banking has about like 30 years of history, but large chunk of the private banking are there only in last 10, 15 years. So with that, the advantage of Nepali banking is like we went directly to CVS system, CVS platform. So like most of the Nepali bankers never had worked in a manual kind of system, like unlike in India, where your public banks largely migrated from a manual platform to the CVS. So we had that advantage, but then our size, very small, pretty small. A bank branch, largely like we have number of BFIs, let's say in commercial banking landscape, about 30 commercial banks, but very small in size. In that sense, largest commercial bank would have about not more than 150 branches, and perhaps about like 100 plus ATMs. So in country total is about like we have about 1600, about 1650 ATMs. But from the perspective of ATM, I think our banker, we yet have not looked it as an ROI sense, because for most of us in ATM is just a value-added product. So I mean, then we forget that like the per day transaction hit, at least it has to be about 275 to 280 transaction hit to have like at least a break even per ATM. So no ATM in that country gives you a break even from like a ROI perspective as well. We, of course, like when we have ATM, we also issue debit cards. So, but the gap between debit card total deposit account to issued debit card is almost 8 million. So about 13 million deposit accounts. So about 4 million debit card issued. So it seems like there's a lot of customer orientation and education, and also cross-selling skills of the lower level frontliner staff has to be carried out at a large scale to address those issues. Then we, last few years, about 4-5 years, we started experimenting with branchless banking and online banking and even mobile banking, but we haven't had much success into that. People still prefer brick and mortar kind of setup. They would like to come to bank and branches, and so we do not have much of a success in a sense that with a total number, registered number of branches banking customer, the transaction is almost same. So that is one transaction per customer per year. So that is at that low. I mean, I think gentleman was talking, I think Mr. Datta was saying 11% of currency circulation of GDP. Ours is about 16%. So we beat you on that. So, because, of course, cash is king, and most of the society would love to have the cash, feel the cash, actually. With the plastics, they would not have any trust. But then we're also discussing about access to finance. This is where I differ from also regulators and policy makers largely, I think, and even with the multilateral agencies, where we have been saying, can we please change this terminology of access to finance and reterm it as an access to formal finance? I mean, from my perspective, there's a huge difference when we say it to formal finance, because mostly our economy in emerging markets are informal. So there's a huge informal markets going in. So challenge is to bringing this informal sector to the formal financing sector. So that is a sort of the intervention we are also trying to make. In terms of disruptive technology, I think the going forward, the payment system, whether you talk about RTGS or any other factor, I mean, what we see going forward, even in a small country like Nepal, where it is technology savvy, technology friendly, with a young population, with a median age of about 26, 27, it's a very young country, just like India. I mean, so these are millennium generation, very techno savvy, like to use technology. So from my perspective, I think our perspective, it would very fast change, outdate, the kind of transition we had, our generation from black and white to color TV was maybe 20 years. But from this technology to next technologies would be very, very rapid. So the big question is, will we have the bank of this structure in next 10 to 20 years? What kind of disruptive technology will come that will compel the bank to change its structure? Will let's say the mom and pop store would convert into a sort of a 7-Eleven, convert into a sort of a payment bank itself? Or will the telco, let's say in the 900 million users you have in India, I mean, that's a huge number, I mean, with that kind of penetration. So will the single device of that smartphone, if you bring the cost down, would it be able to at least take away large chunk of banks' overhead and technology investment and help reduce the spread? And help reduce the cost of fund and balance the spread. I mean, these are for the future discussion point.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have the advantage of directly being on the CBS platform and techno-saving young country. I think you can go ahead. There should not be any barrier for you, I think. Thank you very much. I just travel too much, and on the road, I find everywhere in smaller villages Axis Bank. See, they have been able to penetrate into rural India and, amass business where we even are getting afraid of going, and recently we have started. So I'll just request Mr. Mankad to share his views about with the brick and mortar branches facing obsolescence, how will the banks metamorphose to continue sourcing business? And also, one more thing, that with customers increasingly using alternative delivery channels, how will banks maintain contact with the clients?
Sure, Mr. Mansur. So first of all, thank you for the compliment. I think we see a long term time ahead of us where we do not believe that the branch is obsolescence. I think fundamentally that's not an assumption that we are making. It is absolutely true that the role of the branch is changing very rapidly, and it is putting a lot of demands on all of us to figure out what will we do with this. But the branches are a very integral part of our offering to our customers, be that consumer, be that commercial or corporate or government or whatever. So what changes are we seeing in the work or role of branches as we go about? Clearly routine transactions are plateauing, even reducing in some of the urban areas. That's clearly, we're seeing that already, and it'll accelerate as we go by. And therefore, I can see 3 roles of the branch coming. The first is advisory. Customers still need to come to banks for advice. There are moments of truth where they have to make large decisions, could be a mortgage, could be an investment, could be a large deposit, could be maybe an insurance or whatever it is. There are large decisions, they need some advice, and that I think is something that the branch is well positioned to deliver. Yes, there are remote channels where you can deliver it, but today the branch has an important role, and we think it will continue to be so. Second is issue resolution. Customers sometimes have issues, they want to get something solved, they are stuck somewhere, and there again we feel that the branches will continue to have a big role to play. And the third is so accelerating and evangelizing the digital channel. So I'll give an example. We have about 1,500 cash deposit machines which are actually self-service devices for customers to deposit cash. You can deposit up to 200 notes. It does counts and sorts fake notes and so on, and credits to the customer's account, almost like a teller. When we started putting these in the branches, we found customers were not going there, and obviously they needed to be assisted to go there, right? And therefore, for some time, maybe 2 years or I don't know, whatever time it is, assisted models to help customers move to digital channels will be important part of the branch working. I mean, this is not new. When ATMs came, didn't all the bankers go and tell the customer, look, sir, can I, or madam, can I help you use an ATM? This is how you put a card, you have a PIN, you can withdraw cash, you can print a mini statement. The same thing holds for getting them hooked on to the digital channels, and that will be a very important role. I think one thing that we are also seeing is that the size of the branch is coming down because their work content is changing, and we are adapting the model continuously. To the second question of how do banks maintain contact with their clients in an increasingly digital world, the short answer, of course, is digitally, right? But how do we do that? And there are 2 things that we are trying to do more and more, which is to integrate contactability as a very fundamental part of onboarding. And I think one of the big challenges we have with our legacy data, which is still just 20 years, and other banks will have larger problems, is contactability has legacy issues. Customers move address, even change mobile phone. How do you keep pace? Because there is no requirement for the customers to come and update that with the branches. So we are trying to integrate contactability into every transaction, into every account opening, every onboarding. Some of this is needed for security reasons like OTP, but even fundamentally think about it from a contactability driven way to onboard a customer to a transaction. That makes sure that you are in touch with the customer. So at least you know how to reach the customer if you had to, one. And the second thing is that now with a lot of data infrastructure coming on board, for example, now you really don't need a PAN card to validate PAN. I mean, you need a PAN number, and you integrate with NSDL. You can fetch the PAN, the name of the PAN holder, validate, compare with your account form. CIBIL has actually got very good coverage now. There are social media gives you something if you can figure out a way to use, particularly for lending. So I think looking at ways to contact customers on digital social media channels or use data infrastructure is also a big theme that I think we will need to do. All of us banks have started doing, and we can do a lot more. And finally, I think that the digital sort of model allows the flexibility to segment customers much better. And where there is a commercial opportunity, which means maybe at the higher end, you may still want to establish an in-person contact. So you may still want to reach out to a customer and establish a physical contact. It allows you to do that. Or at the other side, if there is a risk coming, maybe you're seeing some transactions that you do not want, or you see an account looking like delinquent, you might want to reach out there. These things are now much easier in a digital world where you have data, as compared to a decentralized world where you're really dependent on the diligence and the monitoring of people. Human errors do happen. So I think this is the third aspect of contactability, which is at the very high end, and at the adverse end, still actually make effort to reach out. And that is something that will still need to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Mankad. I think in a country like India, the brick and mortar branches will coexist in the near future, may not be immediately going away. So thank you very much. Now we are talking digital banking, and I think for digital banking, as we understand, particularly in a country like India, which is mainly based in rural areas, faith is very important. So to create faith, I think we have to see that risks associated are mitigated. And I think this institute, IDRBT, can be doing a lot of things in that. So I'll request Mr. Rama Sastry to just share his views on, with the digital banking growing exponentially, what will be the new risks and how would be they mitigated?
Actually, that when I was talking about the customer, what he looks for, cost, convenience, and control, I deliberately left out the fourth one, which is the confidence. No, you go to a system provided you are having confidence in that. Therefore, confidence or trust comes out of the security that is there in the overall system, especially in the case of the banking, because that's the actual real money is involved in that when he sends it, whether it reaches the other side or not. And even when somebody puts money into a bank, no, this is the difference I just wanted to bring out. See, today people still have trust in the banks, they deposit the money. In fact, the whole thing is in the form of only digital things. So that level of comfort people already have. They have comfort in a system which is highly digitized and all the funds are managed in the form of information. But when it comes to payments and doing banking through a gadget which is available with him, either in the form of an internet banking or mobile banking, still the customer is not getting the confidence. So that is from the confidence point of view. So, but as far as the bank, but this confidence can come provided banks are able to build a system and convince a customer that these systems are very safe and secure. How to convince? First of all, how to build a secure system. So basically, when the entire IT system is within your own premises, I mean, there is no meaning for premises when you talk of IT system, but still, you feel more confident. See, what you are using are gadgets which are not meant for these kind of secure systems. And internet was not meant for any security-oriented things. Mobiles are meant for something else, but we are using it for this. Onto this, its building is very, very difficult. So on one side, we have to work a lot as to how we are going to build security into this. And then secondly, convince people that there is security in the entire system that is going to be built. The issues are not this. The issue is something slightly different. I get confidence in a system provided I keep doing the transactions and I don't find much of a problem after I do it for a fairly long period. That's the only way confidence comes. Or I'm very sure that the redressal mechanism is exceedingly good, that if a transaction is not taking place, I get a redressal very fast and the right kind of redressal that takes place. But if you want these things to happen, that is, you get the confidence by doing it and the redressal system to be good, actually there is an entire ecosystem which should know about all this digital world. See, today's problem is, if I go to a bank, most of the bank people themselves may not really know how this digital banking is working. That's the first challenge. The second challenge, if at all a fraud takes place or if at all a crime takes place in this digital financial world, do we have an ecosystem which is policing, which is legal to address this system and give a redressal to the customer? This is also not very clear in the today's circumstances. So the necessity is that by building these digital systems, digital mechanism by which you are able to give convenience to the customers to do anytime, anywhere banking, the adequate security be built into it and ensure that this is continuously monitored and see that it is working well. And if something goes wrong, we also have people who have adequate knowledge to understand and bring it back to normalcy. This is the security that is required. Of course, there are institutes like IDRBT focuses on the security, very, very important. You know, we have security labs, we have got mobile security labs, all those which actually looks into apps and will be able to say that these systems are reasonably safe. But the large number of systems to be used by many people, there's many more things that have to be done to see that digital risks are kept. But if you look at the things, there are other ways to put the controls, which is what Reserve Bank is trying to do. I mean, what it says is, okay, transaction beyond 10,000, transaction beyond 25,000, they put limits so that your risks are not very high, risks are reasonably low. And what it ensures the other side is the systems that run behind. If you have an RTGS, if you have an automatic, all those things are highly secured, highly monitored, and that that can be taken care. So when we talk of these payment systems, we should be able to distinguish between the high-end systems, which are large value, systemically important, where the security levels can be very high. But when it comes to customer convenience, you cannot put too much security, but should still be able to have adequate controls to ensure that the losses are very minimized. And the losses are, if at all they take place, that the reversal is always possible to be done. So here, the difficulty, of course, the general difficulty in case of security is always vis-a-vis convenience. So if you want to make it very convenient, your security systems cannot be too strong. But if the security is not too strong, trust is not possible to be built. So what we have to try is an affordable security solutions on these small gadgets like mobiles, on the internet, which will be able to do. Today technology is available and they are actually built into many of the things. Only the message should go that they are reasonable secure. But if you really talk from the angle of technology and risk, I think it is scary. We cannot talk that. That should be taken care by the technologies and banks and not the customers. Customers should be having the awareness only. But as far as the internal strengths and all those things, and there we have to be really worried. We have to really build good systems. So I would put it two things. Those who are building systems, they should feel really worried that this thing go wrong. But those who are using the system, they should be given adequate comfort that these systems are working well. I think this is something which all of us have to work for.
Yeah, thank you, Ramashastri. I think you have rightly said that all systems are highly secure. Only thing is that we should continuously monitor. That is in, I think I could understand. Thank you very much. I am understanding that in India, the number of mobiles is more than the population if we exclude children and super senior citizens. So in this context, I will request Mr. Hota to enlighten us as to how important is mobile payment in the years ahead, one. And secondly, when we see rural India, there is a lot of requirement of education, literacy. So in the second question, I'll just request him to highlight and enlighten us on the availability of digital channels. That is one aspect. Getting clients to use them is another aspect. How will so many clients be educated adequately to successfully migrate to new payment system?
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Mobile banking is an area very close to my heart. I do believe that mobile payment is going to play a very significant role in future. Even in the Western world, please don't say that really mobile banking is popular. There also, it is not that popular. We talk about Kenya, we talk about Bangladesh, Afghanistan, few countries, it has been extremely popular, and they have become a very dominant system in the payments area. In India, really, it has started in 2010, in fact, and when it started with a system of immediate money transfer, instant payment from any mobile number to any mobile number with the mobile number tagged to the bank account, money transfer is possible. Mobile banking, over the last 4.5 years, mobile banking has undergone significant change. We are not that happy. We as a country, even in fact, Reserve Bank is also deeply exercised. Government is deeply exercised. Banks have been also doing a lot of things. Compared to the promise that we have, that 900 million million phones, and maybe the active phones could be about 600 or 650 million phones which are in the unique customers. But the number of transactions, which is hardly about 35 million transactions, it is not that significant. But it is very significant from a very policy angle that, look, India as a country, we are growing at, now at least we are dreaming 8% growth rate. If it continues for a few years, if our e-commerce continues, if the economy in all aspects of economy grows, the kind of transactions that would happen would be phenomenal. Unbelievable amount of transactions. Would it all happen in cash? Would we continue to pay 85% of the electricity bill, telephone bills by cash? Would we continue to pay all the really shopping experience by cash? Would the banking system be able to handle so much of cash? I remember we had gone for one financial inclusion program in a district in Orissa. CGM, State Bank of India was there. One major demand that you cash deposit machines, you have got only 2 cash deposit machines. In our town, there should be 4 or 5, sir. You please install cash deposit machines. Now ATMs, they are not asking. You see, ATMs now fully, it is there. Even at small places, they are asking for cash deposit machines because depositing cash at the bank in the small towns is still a challenge. And even in the cities. So handling of cash would be a challenge for the banks, challenge for RBI itself. We are talking about the cash to GDP 11%. This would if the growth rate goes up, you can imagine what the kind of cash would be generated. So we have to move to non-cash system. Which is the most non-cash system that we can think of? Which is the low-cost, non-cash electronic payment system that we can think of? It is mobile. So mobile has to be the focus. That is why in the Prime Minister, after the Jan Dhan Yojana, the concept of JAM has come, the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and the mobile. How 3 can be combined, Aadhaar as the authentication, mobile as the device, and the account holders. How can it go? Simultaneously, all our prepaid issuers, they have gone for wallets, and you know the success of the wallets. This success have so far been primarily driven by the large volume of discounts, the cash discounts. If you really deposit the recharge the wallet with 100 rupees, you will get the discount of really 20 rupees, 30 rupees. That is not sustainable. It may happen. That is how many of the millions of accounts have been opened, but that is not a sustainable method. The sustainable method is the one which will really drive on its own. So mobile has to be made popular. Obviously, there has to be a delicate balance between security and convenience. So far, the convenience is the issue. At NPCI, we being the pivotal point, the clearing point for all mobile payment transactions, we do believe that the mobile payment system in India is secure enough. In fact, it has become so secure that people are not transacting. In fact, I see that of 100 banks, 85 banks and 11 PPIs which are part of the mobile-based financial transactions, only 9 banks are doing SMS-based transactions. Only 9 banks are doing SMS-based financial transactions because of the fear. I suppose this fear has to go. And Reserve Bank has already relaxed for 2-factor authentication for card payment transactions, for EMV-based card payment transactions. In fact, this is one of the things that can be done, that can the 2-factor authentication, at least the MPIN requirement for mobile PIN, can it be waived for a low value transactions? Say about really 200. That number is also very large. I go to the nearest grocery shop, I buy a really kilo of chawal and some namak, and I pay really 120 rupees or 130 rupees. Can I pay really in a simple SMS way, in a simplistic way? And how can it be made convenient? Obviously, the best thing is to do the contactless. And contactless also really the work is on. But till contactless comes, really this SMS-based simple without PIN transactions is also absolutely required. Today morning session, we really talked about data-driven security, analytics-driven authentication. So instead of every time asking for PIN, can at the back end some analytics be generated, and if something is happening, it can be stopped. Something needs to be worked out, and in fact the work is on. A lot of discussions, seminars, discussions, work is on. The banks have been launching the really different kind of wallets, like State Bank has recently launched Buddy, really very good program. In fact, extremely user friendly. The Chiller, Pockets, and all the telcos have their own programs. That programs have to be made a little more user friendly. I'm very happy that SBI's Buddies is more user friendly than internet banking, and having the same degree of security. Similarly, this more secure platform have to come, and that only can revolutionize payments. And also the interchange and certain aspects of interchange has to be really addressed. If the mobile banking transactions goes the traditional card-based interchange, it will not work. So as currently, mobile-based merchant payments is equivalent to card interchange. That has really, because of, I believe, that is one of the reasons that mobile-based merchant payments have not started. It has to be treated as a different ecosystems and taken care. Sir, coming to your second question, in brief 1 minute, I can say on financial literacy. Financial literacy is very, very important. Without literacy, it cannot really, all these things, all the good things that we are talking about cannot happen. And on a war footing, if it is taken up, it is possible. Very recently, on the 8th of September is the World Literacy Day. So we at NPCI, we thought that let us really try to do something. So we worked with NABARD and the RRBs. We created 120 financial literacy camps we organized on a single day, single time, from 4 to 6 in the afternoon at 120 centers in the country. So no cost involved, except that really NABARD had really paid them this 20,000 as the expenses to each of the centers to the RRBs. So with 20,000 expenses, each of those RRBs could organize one literacy camps. So given if a dedicated focus is given, if everybody is conversed that literacy is the issue that has to be taken, this 1,100 or 1,200 FLCC which are there, they can be reactivated. They can really, on a targeted approach, on a missionary drill, it has to work. And without that literacy, it is not possible. Literacy is required for all kinds of people, even our own people. We also need literacy. One of the occasions I really said, my son-in-law, really after I asked him really what do you, after my daughter got married, in one of the days, I asked him, do you use credit card? Yes, I use credit card. Do you know what is the percentage that you pay? No, really, I something really, but it's not a problem. He did not know that really he used to pay about 30% interest rate. Okay, he used to do 1/10 every month, it gets deducted in 10 installments. He has put it 10 installments. I think the first thing that you do, really, in fact, I told my daughter and wife, both of them, one day really they took the card, and we paid the whole amount. He had really, from 3 banks, he had got 3 credit cards. So you paid off everything, and really you please go out of this 30% culture. Although credit card is good, there may be people with credit card, but people do not know. So people really in the rural side also, they do not know the cost of these things. So the literacy is very, very important, sir. I do believe the literacy has to be something on a war footing. It has to be done. The way Prime Minister Modi really talked, within the period of 6 months, I would like this many million. In fact, banks exceeded 75 million target. It came to really, now it had 150 million targets. That within this period, this much of accounts have to be opened. Banks did that. On the literacy also, similar drive is absolutely necessary so that people get to know that about these things. Work is done, but much more can be done. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Hotaji, for taking a lead in literacy drive. And the literacy is very important because fear has to go. Faith has to be created through literacy and through innovative products with the cost-effective features. So one thing you are talking about 30% interest. I just 1 minute I want to share that we were there in Mysore at the time of inauguration of one ATM, and the deputy commissioner was there. She told that these vegetable vendors and others, they borrow 700 rupees or 800 rupees in the morning from money lenders and pay 1000 rupees in the evening. Immediately within 15 days, we had a camp and we issued Mudra card. We gave them small limits, and we gave them Mudra cards and then told them and gave them that literacy that you draw money at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning from ATMs and deposit in cash deposit machine up to 12 o'clock in the night, there is no interest. And it has been appreciated, very widely. So, Hotaji, that cash deposit machines initially for helping the poorer of the poor people may be required because the ceiling is less than 50,000. So it will not be that, creating that problem. So thank you very much. Quickly, Mr. Subha, actually you shared so many things. I think one thing I was just wondering that what may be the average transactions in ATMs, and you can also share some more views.
I mean, the average ATM transaction is still, I do not have the exact number, but the average hit per day ranging from like about 50, 60 transactions a day to up to about 150. So, I think taking lead from Mr. Huta's point, what he stressed on actually was where the bank and regulator we should focus, particularly for the payment system, is at the BOP model, base of the pyramid. That is where the large chunk of the volume of the transactions are taking place day in and day out. And then there's a whole, GOP, government payment, and the government collections. Mainly revenues and taxes, and even the pensions and provident funds. That is a huge chunk of the fiscal, item. If that can be even channeled through, like that will take care of a lot of your cash necessity. In my country, where like only this is like discussion stage, but nothing informal. I think those are the few issues I would like to put things into perspective. This is a transitional economy and transitional process. Would be interesting to see how far we go. But again, taking lead from Mr. Huta's last point, the bankers will really have to gear up in their risk assessment process. Father-in-law risk assessment process has to be put into place right now. From onwards, particularly for bankers.
Thank you, Subha.